In a quiet village nestled between rolling hills and lush forests, a shadow of terror loomed every fortnight. A monstrous python would slither through the village at night, swallowing anyone in its path. The villagers had come to know the dreadful day it would arrive, but no one ever knew the exact time. Fear gripped them, for no one had found a way to stop the creature. The king and the elders had tried everything, but no solution could be found. The village was alive with laughter and song. The moon was full, casting silver light over the dancers who swirled around the fire. The elders sat under the large iroko tree, nodding approvingly as the younger ones celebrated. Tonight was the festival of Yemoja, and for a few hours, the villagers had forgotten their fear of the python. But just as the drums reached their loudest beat, a strange silence fell over the crowd. The birds in the trees stopped singing. A cool wind blew through the village, chilling everyone to their bones. Suddenly, a low, slithering sound rose from the edge of the village. The drummers froze, their hands hovering above the drums. Then, from the darkness, it appeared, the monstrous python, its scales gleaming in the moonlight, its yellow eyes locking onto the nearest villager. Panic erupted. Mothers grabbed their children, villagers ran in every direction, knocking over pots and baskets in their scramble to escape. But the python moved with terrifying speed. It slid toward an elder who had been too slow to rise from his seat, its mouth opening wide, revealing rows of sharp teeth. Before anyone could react, the python struck. In one fluid motion, it wrapped its massive body around the old man, squeezing until he could barely breathe. The elder's eyes bulged as the python prepared to devour him. With its venomous spit, it paralyzed him, his body stiffening like a log. As the python's jaws stretched wider, the villagers could only watch in horror as it swallowed the elder whole, inch by inch, until there was nothing left but silence. In the dead of night, a young boy named Tunji lay on his mat, tossing and turning. He had heard the whispers that the python was due that night, and though his parents told him to sleep, he couldn't shake the fear. The python was always silent when it came. No one knew exactly when it would strike, and that was what scared him the most. Suddenly, a rustling sound came from outside. Tunji's heart raced. He peered through the small window of his hut, his breath catching in his throat. Then, creeping through the darkness like a shadow, was the python. Its enormous body moved silently through the village, its scales scraping softly against the earth. Tunji knew better than to make a sound. He watched as the python slithered past his home, its massive tail disappearing into the darkness. But then, it stopped right outside his house. The python's head turned slowly toward him, its tongue flickering in the air, sensing something. Terrified, Tunji froze, his tiny body trembling. The python slid closer, its head now right outside the window. Tunji could see its cold, unblinking eyes. He shut his eyes tight, praying the monster wouldn't see him. But then, with a sudden hiss, the python reared back and smashed its head through the wall of the hut. The sound of breaking wood and the boy's scream filled the air. His parents rushed in, only to see the python's long body sliding away into the night, with their son nowhere in sight. The villagers had grown used to avoiding the river at night, knowing it was the python's favorite hunting ground. But Bimpe, a young woman, had no choice. Her baby was feverish, and the healer had asked for fresh river water to cool the child's burning skin. She couldn't wait until morning. With a clay pot balanced on her head, Bimpe hurried through the forest toward the riverbank. The night was still, too still. Her footsteps seemed too loud as she neared the water's edge, her heart pounding in her chest. She crouched to feel the pot, the cool water splashing over her hands. Just as she was about to rise, she heard it, a faint rustle, like dry leaves shifting in the wind. She looked up and saw nothing, but her instinct screamed that something was watching her. Without warning, the python's massive form shot out from the underbrush, its body coiling around her in an instant. Bimpe dropped the pot, her scream echoing through the trees as the python squeezed tighter. Her body went rigid, the python spit working its magic, locking her limbs in place. The python's mouth opened wide, ready to swallow her. But just as its teeth brushed her skin, a group of hunters who had been nearby heard her cries. They charged into the clearing, shouting and waving their spears. The python, startled by the noise, loosened its grip just enough for Bimpe to wriggle free. As the hunters closed in, the python hissed and slithered back into the darkness, vanishing as quickly as it had appeared. Bimpei collapsed by the river, gasping for air, her body still stiff from the python's venom. Among the villagers was a young man named Akin, brave and determined. His grandmother had often told him stories of the python, passing down knowledge that few others knew. She revealed a terrible truth: the python's spit was like glue, freezing its victims in place, leaving them helpless and straight like logs, making it easier for the beast to swallow them whole. One fateful night, as the villagers waited in dread for the python's return, Akin decided it was time to end the nightmare. He prepared himself, knowing the creature's pattern. Armed with nothing but his courage and his grandmother's wisdom, Akin waited. That night, the village was unusually quiet. The python had not appeared at its usual hour, and the villagers, exhausted from fear, fell into a restless sleep. But Akin stayed awake, alert. He knew the python could strike at any moment. And just before dawn, with the second crow of the rooster, a chilling scream pierced the air. It came from Akin's house. The villagers rushed out, fear gripping their hearts. At Akin's door, they watched in terror as the young man faced the enormous python. Its sleek, slimy body coiled around him, its mouth wide, ready to consume him. But Akin was prepared. As the python's spit missed him by a hair, he dodged and leaped, fighting with all his might. The python, frustrated, lashed out and clamped down on Akin's leg, mistaking it for his head. But Akin didn't panic. With his free hand, he drew his sword and plunged it into the python's mouth beside his leg. The villagers gasped, watching as Akin sliced through the python's flesh, inch by inch, even as it continued pulling him into its gaping maw. As the dawnlight broke, the python was finally split in two. Akin lay on the ground, his legs still lodged in the creature's mouth. But when the villagers looked closer, they gasped in horror. The python's head was human. The python's remains were taken to the king's palace, where the village's priest, an old man who had served many kings, was summoned. When he arrived and saw the creature's face, he let out a long, sorrowful sigh. Is this not Odeyemi, the brave hunter? The king and the villagers were confused. How could this monstrous python be the once great Odeyemi, the village's most famous hunter? Seeing their confusion, the priest began to tell a story from his youth. Years ago, Odeyemi was the most celebrated hunter in the village, known for killing only the most fearsome beasts, lions, tigers, and elephants. No one could match his skill, and the other hunters grew jealous. They wanted to know his secrets, so one of them decided to follow him into the deep forest. Hidden in the shadows, the spy watched as Odeyemi approached a large clay pot filled with a strange black liquid. Looking around to make sure no one was watching, Odeyemi climbed into the pot and transformed into a massive python. He slithered deeper into the forest, hunting with ease. The spy, horrified but determined, watched as Odeyemi returned hours later, bloodied from his hunt. Odeyemi climbed back into the pot, returning to his human form, and carried his kill back to the village, none the wiser that he had been seen. Jealousy burned in the spy's heart. He returned to the village and told the other hunters what he had seen. Together, they plotted to destroy Odeyemi. The next time he transformed, they smashed the clay pot and poured out the liquid, hoping to strip him of his power. When Odeyemi returned to find the pot destroyed, he wept, knowing that someone had discovered his secret. Desperate, he rubbed his body against the last few drops of the potion. But it was too late, only his head returned to human form, leaving his body trapped as a python forever. Odeyemi, heartbroken and betrayed, went to the village for help, but the sight of his monstrous body struck fear into everyone. They banished him, unable to live with a man who was part beast. Consumed with rage and sadness, Odeyemi swore revenge, attacking the village every fortnight, swallowing the people who had wronged him. When the priest finished his tale, the villagers were silent, reflecting on the tragedy they had unknowingly brought upon themselves. For his bravery, Akin was rewarded with a share of the king's wealth, but the battle had cost him dearly. The python's bite had left his leg paralyzed, a permanent reminder of his courage. Yet the village finally knew peace, and Akin was remembered as the hero who ended the curse of Odeyemi, the hunter who became a python.